It's not calling you Josh Frydenberg, it's calling you Dosh Frydenberg.
Under the Coalition, taxes for hard-working Australians will always be lower.
You know, I don't hold a hose, mate, and I don't sit in control room.
They're answers that only can come from Victoria, I'm afraid, because that's not my job.
But I ain't spending any time, though, because in the meantime, every 3 months, a person was torn to pieces by a crocodile in North Queensland.
Well, good day, listeners, and welcome once again to the Two Jacks. It's episode 126 in our ongoing analysis of news and media in Australia and all the way around the world. And joining me, as usual, is Hong Kong Jack. G'day, mate. How are you?
I'm well.
And how are things in Hong Kong?
Well, we just had another typhoon, a T8, a very blowy T8. And I did notice yesterday there was a little pile of patio furniture wrapped in black plastic and all locked together with chains, and it was sitting on Shelley Street, and I suspect that all the
over the top.
It's come over the top, and all the locking together with chains has worked, except that they hadn't locked it down to anything well enough. So,
but by wrapping them up in chains, they've turned a potentially lethal device into an almost certain lethal device yes. if it hits someone on the head.
Yeah, well, these things are quite light. There's those modern aluminium things.
Well, the chains wouldn't be too bloody light, mate.
Yeah. Anyway, so it's one of those
velocity and all that sort of stuff.
It's one of those things where someone's got things 99% right and 100% wrong.
Yes, there you go. All right, well, we've got a huge show today, so we better get on, and we'll start in my own backyard. We got a rather lovely letter from an old friend of ours who's a listener of the program. We'll call him Grant. We might also call him Trivalve. That's his old blogging nickname in the old days at the Oz. He mentions he's got a number of matters that he wants to unload upon. Trainers on NRL football fields. He could say the same about the AFL, but the AFL cracked down on it, of course. And he said, I've whined for years about the extended presence of Alfie Langer on the field in Broncos and Queensland State of Origin games way too much of the time. Sometimes he's in the bloody back line. Get him off. And that sounds like pretty good stuff. He also points out, this is actually a good point, that this is in relation to Kathleen Folbigg, who has now been exonerated. And Channel 9 had a banner on their news saying Exonerated Child Murderer Folbigg. Well, you can't, that is a classic oxymoron, Jack. Exonerated Child Murderer. Yes. Certainly tortured language, isn't it?
It is. Yeah. It's not good work. I mean, it's technically, I suppose it's correct, but it's just not good work.
Yeah. And then he also talks about a bit of travel overseas. He's a well-travelled man, his TV. And he said, in 2010, I went and visited a crew in Libya, a couple of 100 clicks from the coast. We should also explain he's a mad Collingwood barracker. And when he got to Libya, he found 2 Australians were there, and he noted that Grant was wearing, one of the 2, noted that Grant was wearing a Collingwood cap and said, Jesus Christ, I come to the middle of the Sahara and I still can't get away from them being Collingwood supporters, Jack. So that's a pretty funny sort of thing there. We'll get to the AFL finals. Another little moan he's got here, and I kind of find myself in agreement here. Bike lanes in Melbourne, and they're all over the place in Sydney and expanding there too. Since moving here, Grant says, I've nearly been taken out twice, once getting off a tram, saved by a poor lady in front of me who was taken out instead. She received some nasty injuries. The next one was a food delivery rider going through a red light. I've nearly been cleaned up a few times, and being a country boy as I am, whenever I go to Sydney, I'm just going to stumble across these bike lanes. Now, that's probably my fault. Well, it definitely is. But, gee, there's been a couple of times when I've been very close to getting steamrolled.
The thing that I notice is whenever I see vision of Sydney is that there are cars lined up all over the place and no one at all on the bike lane.
Yeah, well, you do see more and more of them, Jack, and they get up a fair rate of knots too. So, they're going at 40, 50 kilometres an hour sometimes. And if you're in the wrong place, as I was, and nearly got cleaned up, you can suffer a very serious injury, I would think. Grant also mentions a little thing. We are veering a fair bit into sport before we actually get there, but he talks about the AFLW and wonders whether whether it's affecting netball numbers around the country in terms of, I guess, spectators, television numbers, and also participation numbers. But I did have a quick look, and the participation numbers in netball are still very, very strong. One of the highest participation sports in the country.
Yeah. I grew up in country Victoria, and all of the football leagues and football clubs in rural Victoria are now designated as, my old club is the Cobram Football and Netball Club.
Yeah, the suburban clubs are pretty much the same now too.
And the leagues are whatever the league is, football and netball league. And I kind of wonder what effect it will have on that. I mean, one of the reasons why the AFLW standard has gone up so much is that they've now got players who have played this continuously, who didn't get to 12 or 13 and go and play netball, then come back to AFL, but have kept their skills up by playing through.
Or soccer.
Or whatever. Whatever other sport they played and then came back to AFL. Now they've got people who've gone all the way through, and the skills have gone up immensely this year. This is the biggest jump step that we've had in AFLW this year.
Yeah, I would say so. On the games that I've watched, you're seeing the players kick longer, kick more accurately. The skills are better. One of the issues we did have with the game a couple of years ago was, no one, well, with the exception of a handful, no one could really kick the ball over 40 metres, and on a ground that's sometimes almost 200 metres long, that makes it pretty hard to score. But those skills are improving. More seriously, Grant mentions Weambilla. He corrects me on that. I think it's Weambilla. I think that's how it's pronounced. But he says, time to do something about sovsits, I reckon, but what? He mentions that he used to holiday in Bright, beautiful part of the world. And then we got another note from another listener, from Andrew, who weighed into Paul Punker and Desi Freeman. He said, something for your next Two Jacks podcast. It's frightening the amount of support that whack job, that's Freeman, for Paul Punker has around the district. It's actually pretty frightening to consider how many sovsits there are. And a lot of people I wouldn't have expected are sovereign citizens. So that's from Andrew, who's one of our listeners as well. The police Victoria Police have certainly indicated that they believe that Desi Freeman has received some assistance from other members of the high country community around there. So they believe that he has been aided. It's when we go around the country, you'll find pockets where sovereign citizens kind of are. Areas around Gladstone and the Wheatbelt in Western Australia is one such area. Albury Wodonga, Jack, not far away from Port Punker, is another one. North and then up north in the Northern Rivers, and then you've got another sort of lot around southwestern Queensland. Those are the sort of pockets that have been generated really by senior figures in this kind of movement, if you want to call it that. Most of them are relatively harmless, but the fact remains they spend their time in internet echo chambers where violent rhetoric is just normalised. And I guess the other thing we have to say is, and it's a very obvious statement, is that the people who are at greater risk from sovereign citizens are the police. So, as we discussed in the last week's program, the police will have to be increasingly thorough with their assessments whenever they present a warrant on a property.
Just talking about the support up in that district, there is kind of a long history, I mean, to my knowledge, going back to the 70s, of a sort of anti-establishment. Not so much a group, but that kind of culture way up in the mountains and in the remote parts of eastern Victoria, from the Gippsland side and from the northern side as well. So I've been here.
Illegal tobacco, weed, those sorts of things. Yeah. And it's in those kind of communities, if you want to call, sort of fringe dwelling communities, that sovereign citizen ideology can take hold very quickly.
Because they already see themselves as outsiders to some extent,
Yes. And we look forward to Freeman being captured. I think that's probably the best outcome. And captured alive, it may not be possible, but it would be very, very good to see him go through the full court proceedings.
Yeah, it's
no
really
doubt he'd come up with his sovereign citizen nonsense, and he's done it before.
It's really rugged country up there, up the Buckland Valley, and if he gets way up the Buckland Valley, which he could well already been, there's a lot of ways out.
I don't know if you saw the story of a New Zealand father who basically absconded with his 3 children, and he was shot dead by New Zealand police in central North Island yesterday, and one of his children retrieved. I looked for some updates, but I think the two other children remain missing, and grave fears are held for their safety. This fellow has been on the run for years, and I'm not suggesting he's a sovereign citizen. It seems to me, in my reading of it, that there's a family law dispute that he just wouldn't accept, which is a bit of a sovereign citizen thing, but I'm not sure that he's part of that organised community. Various sightings around the place. He's been all over the North Island, and some pretty wild country there too. All righty. The big news yesterday, as we record this on the 9th of the 9th, 2025, the big news yesterday was Erin Patterson received a sentence of life in prison and a 33-year non-parole period. She's got 31 years and change to serve before she could be eligible for parole, Jack.
Yeah, she's eligible to get out in 2056, I think, according to the judgment.
I think she served something like 500 odd days already, yeah.
And I can say with a great deal of confidence, as I was born in 1955, I will not be there to see her.
She would. She's just turned 50, so she would be 81 and change before she's eligible for parole. Good sentence, Jack?
What I've read of the judgment, it's what I expect of Chris Beale. He's a very good lawyer, and it makes a lot of sense to me. I mean, he said he had to give her a non-parole period because it's probable she's in solitary now, 22 hours a day, locked up in the cell, and it's probable because of the publicity of the case that she will remain in solitary for quite some time, and the only way he could deal with that was to set a non-parole period. But he was scathing about her, and he pointed out, I think as we have as well, that the damning thing about this is this was no act of passion, not even the work of a day. This was something that she required a great deal of preparation and forethought and intent for, and therefore should attract a sentence at the very serious end of the range.
Yeah, absolutely. I don't think there are too many arguments about it. The Australian did run a piece today comparing the sentence with a number of other notorious killers. She received a longer non-parole sentence than Paul Denyer, for example, who was a serial killer down Frankston Way. Continues to be an irritation to corrective services officers. But yeah, look, she caused immeasurable pain to her victims, and as we've got this sort of ripple effect of trauma that goes out into deep into families and communities in Gippsland, Jack.
It does. One thing I've noticed since then is the butchers of Melbourne are no longer selling beef Wellingtons. They're now calling it beef en croûte.
Is that right? So
it's almost exactly the same dish. It's a distinction without a difference. But
my butcher says pretty much from the time the matter first came, before even Patterson was charged, he said you couldn't sell anything with mushrooms in it.
Yeah. Well, tell him to change the name to beef en croûte.
I think he's just completely knocked it on the head, mate. He's not selling a lot of mushroom-related meat. One thing that surprised me, and I guess there is an adequate explanation for it, but we talked a couple of weeks ago about the psychiatric evaluation. Now, I presume, reading between the lines, there certainly was no psychiatric evaluation referred to in the sentencing remarks, and it is likely, I'm presuming, it is likely that Patterson refused to be engaged in that.
Could well have done. Nor would it have gotten her very far. The psychiatric stuff is very hard to make fly when you've got this degree of preparation.
Yeah, I just from a criminological point of view would be fascinated to read it. As I said, she's said herself that she's on the autistic spectrum, but that's only a very small part of it. And as you say, a protracted period of planning designed to cause maximum pain and death to her victims. So there's something a lot more than being on the ASD spectrum.
Yes.
Than that. So it unfortunately, because she's expressed no regret, we really don't know anything about her motives or her mental state at the time when she was planning these terrible crimes. Moving on, Jack. Fiona Brown. She's the forgotten person in the Higgins-Learman dispute. Bruce Learman's appeal in the federal court died a horrible death last week. I don't know if you saw that. Oh dear! The full bench were unimpressed, to say the least.
And the coverage of the hearing won't be comfortable reading for his lawyer.
She's also representing Mark Latham, Jack. I don't know if you're aware of that in this dispute he has with his ex-girlfriend.
Fiona Brown's the only person who comes out of...
She is, and she's the one who remains uncompensated.
Yeah. She's the only person...
Basically career ruined.
She's the only person in the whole thing, and I would include the judges involved in that. She's the only one who comes out smelling of roses, right? She absolutely did do. She's been accused of covering up a rape, and the evidence is she did absolutely the right thing, right? But as you say, she remains
to the point where she was clashing with senior members of the government.
Yes.
So she stuck her chin out. And
said, "No, this is what we're supposed to do.
Let's do the right thing here."
Yes, yeah.
And I think even challenges within the Prime Minister's department.
Yes, indeed there were, and she stuck to her guns and absolutely did the right thing. And she's been hung out to dry, accused of something quite horrendous, that is covering up a rape. This is a pretty terrible thing, really.
I mean, I think those allegations have now been stomped on, but at the same time, her career as a public servant is essentially over because of her involvement in this, as good as it was. So she should be making
her work life might be over. It seems that she's been unable to return to work since this, a work of any kind.
Yeah, that's right.
And it's in my view, it's a disgrace that the government is dragging its heels on this. If they were prepared to solve the compensation problem for Brittany Higgins in super quick time, because I've sat across the table from the Commonwealth Government solicitor, speed is not their usual thing. They solved that pretty damn quick. It's time to get off their backsides and fix this one.
Has she put in a statement of claim?
I think she has. Yes, I believe she got some sort
That
of
should be, if that's the case, that should be knocked over in an afternoon.
Yes, yeah. Wheel in a nice big wheelbarrow and fill it full of cash and let it go home.
Absolutely, absolutely. Yep. Yes, she's the one who comes out in this whole tawdry affair. Of course, the federal court determined that Learman did rape Brittany Higgins, but of all the staffers and all the ministers, she's the one who comes out of this clean as a whistle, and she's probably suffered as much, if not more, than just about anybody else. I won't include Brittany Higgins in that, but everybody else. All right, we need to move on. Jacinta Price Napajima, Nampajimpa, I should say. She was rather loose-lipped last week, Jack. And she was on an ABC interview with PK, and she claimed that Labor was engaged in immigration that would lead to new arrivals, residents and citizens voting for Labor. And she mentioned the Indian community in particular, Jack. She backtracked. But it was messy, wasn't it? And it remains messy.
I'm actually missed this, I must say. But
well, the Liberal Party, including Susan Lee, Julian Leeser, has actually made an apology on Price's behalf because she won't. She's acknowledged that she made errors, and she regrets making those errors. But she's issued no apology, so it was left to Julian Lisa to do so. And Lisa joined Lay, Paul Scarr and Maria Kovacic on a tour of businesses in Harris Park, which is a prominent location for the Indian community in Australia and in New Parramatta and Sydney's West. Some businesses were happy to host them. This is the thing, Jack. But several others refused, saying they would not engage with Lay. This is according to the Sydney Morning Herald. They would not engage with Lay or other Liberals until Price issued an unconditional apology or was sacked from the shadow ministry. And that might be a bit of an insertion by the SMH, but there is a fairly strong demand for an unconditional apology from Jacinta Price, something that she continues to refuse to do. Our very good friend, the pollster, from Redbridge,
Cos Samaras.
Cos just came out and got it in one. He said some of these people, and he didn't mention Price by name, but some of these people don't really understand that elections are won and lost in New South Wales and Victoria, and if you go ruffling those feathers, and this is something the Liberal Party did in their dismal election campaign at the last federal election. They seem to set China. They seem to have a set against the Chinese community, also the Indian community, and they got walloped as a result. George, in the Four Corners analysis of the defeat, said. Basically, it got to a point where we're insulted and offended so many groups in the community that we were flat out trying to find more to. We just sort of abused everybody, and so it's continuing here. I wonder, her political instincts are dreadful. Let's be honest. Jumped ship from the Nats to the Libs, was going to be Angus Fraser's deputy, despite being in Parliament for about 2 minutes. And I just think she's not a team player, and not showing any signs of being a team player at all. And I think she's going to be a shambles for the Liberal Party unless she starts learning some collegiate skills, Jack.
Look, some politicians are like some footballers. They start off with 2 or 3 good games and that's it. You know,
Yeah, I think you're about right with that assessment. You can be
and they get a bit carried away with how good they are.
you can be Bob Catter. You can be Bob Catter. I made the point on X and got a bit hammered by one of the Cephs about it, and he was right, and I was a fair way wrong. But Catter to this day only survives on Labor preferences. Before he was a national, that's the bit I got wrong. But before he represented the Nats, but from basically if Labor had a problem with Bob Catter, they wouldn't preference him. They'd preference the LNP, but they don't do that. So Catter gets away with this stuff. But everyone, Catter's not aligned to a major party, and he can say outrageous things, and he was fairly outrageous, grabbing hold of a loud hailer with just lots of Nazi symbols all over it from a rally.
But that's part of his brand. That works for him.
Yeah, it's just not going to work in mainstream politics, is it?
No, but he's from North Queensland, and it works for him. Yeah.
And you'd think I would just wanting to contribute a little bit for Jacinta Price. There's a fair bit going on in Alice Springs that might be drawing her attention too, rather than pondering immigration issues. She's got a shadow ministerial responsibility on defence acquisitions. So, the problem, part of the problem, Jack, is they get on media. This was the ABC, not Sky. They get on media, they say the wrong things, and then they can't walk it back.
Yes. She was a bit of a star during the Voice campaign and all that kind of stuff. She had she got great publicity, and she showed some real political skills. Right?
Yeah, she did.
But like I say, 2 or 3 great games doesn't make a career.
No. And if you're just in the business of naysaying, you're a bit limited too, Jack. You can only play on the half-forward flank. You can't play in the midfield, right? Yeah. So, all right. We'll move on from that one now too. Staying with Australia, I'm going to be writing about this tomorrow, I think.
Black market gaspers.
Yes. Well, Jack, I can only tell you that in my country town, population, I'm going to say 25,000, there are 5 tobacconists, Jack. It's a lot of tobacconists. It's a lot of tobacconists for a small country town, isn't it?
Tobacconist wasn't a category that ever existed. Well, I think in the country town I grew up in, a couple of thousand people, people went to the supermarket to buy their smokes, or the newsagent.
Or the bottle shop.
Yeah, or the bottle shop. Well, there was no real bottle shops then, but yes.
BWS, I mean, there's big one.
I'm a bit pre-BWS.
I don't think they sell smokes anymore, but Dan Murphy's is the big chain.
Yeah.
Or its own chain,
but 10 tobacconists. This would be like in the UK, they've had a huge explosion in the number of Turkish barbers.
Turkish barbers are actually really good.
Yeah, but they are good. But the numbers, I think there are more Turkish barbers in the UK than there are Turks. And one wonders what it's a cover for.
Well, I won't get involved in that, but in a lot of strip malls in urban, decrepit strip malls in urban United States of America, you might have 3 barbershops, Jack. Now that would indicate a fair amount of drug traffic going through the place. I wouldn't cast aspersions on Turkish hairdressing because it's.
I don't think these Turkish barbershops that I'm referring to have anything to do with the Turks.
It's a holistic thing, Jack. You get a full body scrub and a bit of a massage and all this sort of stuff. According to the Instagram account that I follow with this Turkish fellow, he's got all sorts of tricks and devices there, scrubs you up. And so we'll leave the Turks out. But, yeah, look, the fact remains, in my small town we've got 5 tobacconists. So it's like for the policymakers, it's like the 20th century never happened. It's like prohibition in the United States never happened. And it's like 6 o'clock closing never happened in Australia. That these things that created a prohibition or bans on certain substances naturally, instinctively led to the creation of significant black markets. And it's like they just haven't learned anything from this. And when you look at the policy stuff, there's a policy statement from the Commonwealth Department of Health that was smoking or tobacco use from 2023 to 2030. And they just believe that if you continue to increase the price via excise, everything will be beautiful and people will just stop smoking. And now they've driven our actual policymakers, our parliamentarians, into a situation that they can no longer win. They're losing money hand over foot in terms of excise because people are buying from the black market, mainly, rusted on smokers. It's not necessarily new smokers. And these same black markets are selling vapes as well. So what do, Jack? Do they reduce the excise? So they've just put themselves into a corner, policy-wise. Do they reduce the excise so the legitimate cigarette stuff, legitimate tobacco product sales more affordable? Or do they let this black market flourish? They reckon there's a factory making cigarettes for the Australian market solely in Iraq, and they bring it all here.
I wouldn't doubt that. There's one thing that you missed that this does, and that they have missed in thinking this through. What it does is it makes breaking of some laws completely respectable.
Yeah.
So right through the 60s, 50s, 60s, 70s in Australia, in my memory, being a starting price bookmaker or trading in after hours booze was completely respectable. They were against the law. You could go to jail for them. I mean, you and I know this.
We have not so much the SPs, but certainly in Sydney and Melbourne, the sly groggers, they became these great sort of networks for crime anyway, receiving stolen goods and all this sort of stuff.
Well, being an SP bookmaker in rural Australia was a perfectly respectable profession.
What else were you going to do if you wanted to have a bet?
Yes.
You either had to go to a racetrack or not bet.
Yeah, and the going to the racetrack was okay for the well-off, but if you're a working bloke, you couldn't do that. So you went to the local pub and had a bet, right?
But the mentality,
or the local butcher shop,
Understanding all that history, the mentality, you can see the policy statement that says the more we drive up the price, the less smokers we will have. There's not even a thought that a black market would be created, and we are seeing a more and more complex black market, including mass production in a country like Iraq that is basically providing tobacco and vapes to this country. One of the worst decisions I've ever seen made. It was joint Liberal and Labor one was the thing about vapes, because a lot of the research indicates that vapes, the vapes that are sold unregulated now are probably very dangerous to users. So at least if you bring it in the tent, you can regulate it safely. And also there was a raft of data that suggested that a lot of people who were on the gaspers got off them by using vapes, nicotine-based vapes. And they just ignored all that stuff.
Tony Burke wins the prize for mine. What was his statement? We are not going to let organised crime dictate our health policy.
I saw that. Yeah. Well, no, listen, mate.
Is there an award for cluelessness?
Oh, well, and it's just this. Look, Premier Minns. I mean, all the states is having to devote hundreds of millions of dollars now for policing and law enforcement around this sophisticated black market. If you are paying full price for your smokes at the moment, you are a mug. Right?
What's full price? $50 a pack or something?
Oh, 55. Yeah, 55 for a packet of 30s, let's say.
Yeah.
55, $60.
And black market, how much do you get them for?
12.
And there's still plenty of fat in the 12. They cost about $4 to make, don't they?
Well, I may as well. I'll confess. I buy a carton of Benson Hedges from one of the said illegal tobacconists. and it's $120 for a pack of 10.
Yeah, okay.
It's either that or 2 packets of, I mean, I'm not doing it. I'm refused to do it. As you say, it's an acceptable level of law breaking because the policy settings are so stupid, so ridiculous.
Yeah. The other thing that I saw a comment on this, which I think is very true, is that every scrap of evidence from around the world is that the longer a black market is in place, the harder it is to stop.
Yeah, absolutely. And also, Jack, because our policymakers are in the vanguard of no smoking or anti-smoking, anti-tobacco, it is now a hub for organised crime.
Yeah, always beware of the well-intentioned
more profit here
politician
than anywhere else.
Yeah.
I mean, it's like the 20th century. Al Capone never. Who's Al Capone? Who's Joe Kennedy? It's like it never happened.
They will always chase a high profit, and if you create a high profit margin, they'll chase it.
Yeah. Anyway, I don't know what the answer is. I think they've basically policied themselves into a corner where they really can't now drop the excise, and really you're just going to have this. They'll go around with their seizures, opening up containers, and all that sort of stuff. And and we know this from drugs and all sorts of contraband being smuggled into the country, they're getting 1 in 10, and the suppliers factor that into the price. All right, just dumb. I've written about this on a number of occasions, and it's just the dumbest thing. And now it's those policy birds are coming home to roost. Jack, a petition on change.org has received over 117,000 signatures for calls to deport Thomas Sewell, neo-Nazi founder of the National Socialist Alliance, I think is one of the names of the. He's currently on bail after being charged for 2 counts of intimidating a police officer or a police officer's family member and multiple personal safety intervention order breaches. He'd been on bail and then he was remanded in custody after the attack on Camp Sovereign in Melbourne.
This is the Indigenous camp in the Domain.
Yes, he was charged with violent disorder, affray, assault by kicking. They're all kickers, Nazis. Have you noticed that? They jump in with their boots every time. Violent disorder, affray, assault by kicking, and discharge missile. Sorry.
Is that because of their back rowers in rugby by background, or
no? It's they're all just kickers. They're like soccer hooligans. Soccer hooligans love to kick before they punch. Anyway, I said, because it is clear that Sewell was born in New Zealand. Yes. Now, he may have discarded his citizenship. There's no indication that he has, but he may have. He may have applied for and received Australian citizenship, but he may well hold citizenship as we've discussed previously. The New Zealand citizenship is basically anyone who wants one can have one.
And it seems to be hard to get rid of.
And a little bit difficult. It's more expensive. It's more expensive to get rid of it than it is to keep and get a passport, which I love. Got my New Zealand passport. Anyway, my issue, and I'll ask you this on an immigration law basis, is that there's a case where a prominent a criminal by the name of Bertie Kidd, he was serving a long jail sentence. He'd been involved in robbery, counterfeiting. He was a pretty violent bloke as well. I've spoken to him a couple of times. Very old bloke now. I think he's still alive and living in Tasmania with Parkinson's disease. But Bertie Kidd had done national service pre the Vietnam War. He didn't serve or do any combat, but the Commonwealth's a deportation order was rejected by the courts because he had performed national service. But in the case of Bertie Kidd, he was not an Australian citizen. He was a UK citizen who'd come to the country when I think as a very young child. and that was found to be the case. So I'm presuming Thomas Sewell, who is listed as ex-ADF, would have the same get out, Jack. What do you reckon?
Well, yeah, he may well have, and he may well indeed be a dual citizen, dual Australian,
I
New
would think
Zealand
that's
citizen.
more likely than not, yeah.
And whatever the case, there are a lot of hoops to jump through, even if he's not an Australian citizen, to deport somebody. And if you want a very good legal explanation, just Google Abul Rizvi and The Independent. Abul wrote, who's a former very senior official in the Department of Immigration, wrote a piece this week that's in The Independent, and he sets out the hoops that a government has to go through to deport somebody, and it's not easy, is the answer.
The Kiwis themselves were particularly upset at the number and frequency of deportations of Kiwi citizens to or back to the land of the long white cloud.
That's because they were clearing the hoops with a bit to spare.
They weren't Australian citizens or residents?
They were Australian residents, but the hoops require evidence of conviction for serious offences, etc., etc. And the Kiwis were going back because that in fact had happened.
Well, I reckon it should be New Zealand's problem.
Yeah.
I reckon. I did make a suggestion last week that perhaps they pop him in a share house in South Auckland, and he can hook up with some of the locals there, and he'd have a lovely time eventually. Yeah. Look, well, let's go back to the originals now. Look, he's obviously presumed innocent on the matters in relation to the assault or the attack on Camp Sovereign, but if he's found guilty of violent disorder, affray, assault by kicking and discharge missile, given his significant criminal history, Jack, he'd have to be looking at a decent jail, wouldn't he?
He may qualify for deportation, but it's just not easy to do, and it shouldn't be.
Oh, I don't know. True enough, but the offences that he's charged with. I mean, was it just me, but if people were charged with affray in the past, that generally came with a jail sentence. Now the charges of affray, you rarely see a sentence handed down.
It's strange, but a lot of things these days that used to attract serious consequences are kind of more or less decriminalised.
Well, affray and riotous behaviour were sort of hand in glove in those days. Now I think they throw around the affray charge a bit, but perhaps a bit more frequently. But affray where people are injured and there were people hospitalised, I can't see any reason why we should be letting Thomas Sewell walk in the sunshine, Jack.
I'd be surprised if he got a sentence for that. I mean, burglary's now being decriminalised in Australia, really.
Yeah, but violent disorder, affray, assault by kicking and discharge missile, someone with a significant criminal history, including charges of 2 counts of intimidate police officer or police officer's family member.
No, we'll have to see how it plays out.
We'll see how it plays, but
seriously
disappointed if he doesn't do some bird.
Yeah, but
he's in custody now, so they'll be counting. They're counting days already. But
if you want to know what the law is, go to the Independent and read Abul Rizvi, and he has set it out accurately as far as I can say.
All right, okay. A week or so ago now. Bob Carr and Dan Andrews were in China for the 80th anniversary of the end of Japanese imperialism on China, Jack. Essentially the end of World War II as far as the Chinese see it. Big military parade. Oh, gee, they've got some kit now. I know they put the good stuff up on the front, but it was a little bit of a reminder that China's military strength is growing by the day and growing in that really key area of how battles are fought and won now by technology. But we had Dan Andrews in a photo op with Kim Jong-un. We had and Vladimir Putin, of course, and And Bob Carr, well, he may not have been invited to pose for the cameras, but or perhaps wisely decided not to, and caused quite a furor over here. But I'd suggest to you, Jack, that they're both just making a bit of money from our major trading partner.
Bob always denies this, and he on social media was coming up with more and more elaborate explanations as to why he was there, and I couldn't help myself. I said, that's okay, Bob. We all know why you're going, and that seemed to amuse quite a number of people. Dan Andrews is a different kettle of fish to Bob Carr. He doesn't apologise. Never complain, never explain, and never ever apologise. And I would be staggered if he wasn't clipping a ticket somewhere along the line.
Well, Damon Johnson, one of the Australians, Melbourne-based journalists, in fact, I think she's the boss of the Victorian office or Melbourne office, he wrote a piece about this, and he spoke to an unnamed political friend of Dan Andrews who says he doesn't give a fuck about you. He doesn't give a fuck about any journalist and what they think of him. He's over there making millions of dollars.
It could well be. And indeed, this is pretty common for ex-politicians to use their connections, their contacts, and their influence to make money, not just in China, but in the United States, in the United Kingdom, around the Pacific.
If you have a personal meeting, or a greet at least, with Xi Jinping, that alone comes with considerable influence, one would think.
Yeah.
All right, we'll move on. In the United States, the Trump's birthday.
Can I just add, that happens to some extent within Australia. If you go to party political functions of either of the big parties,
you want to have a look at the people who are fair work commissioners now, Jack.
Yeah, but if you
they're all political hacks.
If you just go to a party political function and there's a senior party officer there, people will line up to have their photo taken with them, because at least in some communities that carries a fair bit of weight. If you if you've got on your wall a photo of yourself shaking hands with the Premier, for a lot of people that carries some real importance.
All right. Well, let's move on, because it is very, very important. This Donald Trump's birthday wishes extended to Jeffrey Epstein, I think on the event of his 50th birthday, yes it was, has emerged, Jack. The Wall Street Journal had in fact described that they had cited this, and Donald Trump threatened to sue them. In fact, I think those threats still remain a live possibility. I think there's a several billion-dollar claim there. But on Monday, House Oversight Committee members confirmed that they had received a copy of the birthday book, including the letter bearing Mr. Trump's signature. President Trump called the Epstein investigation a hoax. This is a quote from Robert Garcia, who is the committee's Democratic ranking member. Said President Trump called the Epstein investigation a hoax and claimed that his birthday note didn't exist. Now we know that Donald Trump was lying and is doing everything he can to cover up the truth. Enough of the games and lies. Release the full files now. The White House has responded, Jack. They hadn't just before we started recording, but they are claiming that it's a forgery.
Mm.
Good luck with that. It'll be very interesting to see how the legal Barney goes between Donald Trump and Rupert Murdoch. This is, in a nutshell, this is an issue that will not go away. It's not going to be the sort of issue that will, I don't think, potentially bring the president down. I mean, I always think that will be the economy, but he's just carrying this as baggage moving forward. we know too that
There's almost nothing we don't. I mean, he's like Bill Clinton. There's almost nothing we don't know about how bad his behaviour is already. It's going to have to be something pretty damn shocking to make our view of that worse.
There are allegations. This is all pre-2003. What is said about the 2004 breakdown of the relationship between Epstein and Trump is correct, that they had very, very little contact after that. Now, some people explain that collapse as not being Donald Trump saying, "Hey, you're stealing young girls from my health spa," which is what he claimed not so long back, but because Epstein had made a bid for a house and Trump came in and bought it on behalf of a Russian oligarch. The figure was, I think, Epstein offered $35 million, $41 million was what Trump paid for the property, and then the Russian oligarch provided Donald Trump with $96, I think, million for the same property, which would be a huge red flag for money laundering. So that's a bit of an issue. But if we go back before 2003, Jack, we have a very close relationship with Donald Trump. There is at least one woman alleging that she was indecently dealt with by Donald Trump when she was a minor. And I don't think this stuff's going to go away. There are a number of people, in fact, one's been named, who's a sort of Republican benefactor who's been named. And we also know that there's another two people that will be redacted for some reason. Who might they be, Jack? Not Donald Trump, by the way, but two other people whose names will be redacted if these files are released.
Oh, well.
Jack, you can't just, this stuff. I mean, these are allegations that the US president is a pedophile or was engaged in pedophilic activities with young girls who were lured as prostitutes by Ghislaine Maxwell. Her evidence, by the way, that she gave while incarcerated just recently was that she couldn't remember who had signed or made entries for Jeffrey Epstein's birthday book. So again, I think her credibility is in question.
We'll see where the evidence goes.
Well, it's mounting, Jack. So what we're talking about is, why not release it? This is what everyone's saying. Well, why not just release it? Let the chips fall where they may. If Bill Clinton's got a problem, so be it. If Donald Trump's got a problem, so be it.
Oh, well, we'll see where it goes.
Yeah, well, we're seeing where it goes, Jack, and it's a government cover-up, and they're going to continue to do so because either Trump or significant figures within the Republican Party are involved in this, and possibly both. But we'll move on. US jobs market, I always say it's the economy that's going to nail Trump, and it's not looking flash. US jobs market weakened further in August. Employers added just 22,000 jobs. You'd be disappointed in Australia if that was the number created. Fewer than expected. The unemployment rate ticked up from 4.2 to 4.3. It's not serious. It's not really serious unemployment until it gets beyond 5. But we will get some inflation numbers 2 days from now on the 11th, September the 11th. And we're also hearing that 86, according to Merchant Bank, Malcolm Turnbull worked with them. I'm just trying to think of the name of them.
Goldman Sachs.
Yeah, Goldman Sachs are saying that 86% of tariffs are being absorbed by importers, but that can't last. So we've got some issues there. While we look at polling very briefly, Trump's net approval rating has fluctuated between -7 and -10 since early July, but he's still more popular among registered and likely voters than he is among all US adults. A recent YouGov poll has his negative approval rating at -12. Those are not disastrous figures, Jack.
No, the economy's always going to be the danger point for him. The bit of news that would concern me most if I were in the White House was the story that John Deere reporting really bad profit figures, etc. And
that rather famous company, Agricultural Equipment Providers, they look like they go to the wall.
Not only are they do they make a great trucker's cap that you can get you great credibility in a craft beer bar, but they are a sort of a huge brand in the parts of the country that will decide the next election. This is not going to be for Trump, but this is going to be the worry for whoever his successor is.
So you reckon?
Yeah.
I still see a lot of Trump 2028 flags around, mate.
That's much more of a worry than anything else.
These jobs figures, I mean, just to say, across a nation of 310 million people, they added just 22,000 new jobs. That's a shocker. In fact, I think it's the first time the jobs data has gone sort of negative since the pandemic. So these are bad figures.
Yeah,
and of course we've got the inflation figure coming out. Certainly, from just watching things, those things that Americans can't provide, so things like coffee and chocolate and things like that, are going through the roof on supermarket shelves.
Yep.
All right, France, government in chaos, Jack. The government has actually collapsed. The Prime Minister Francois Bayrou rolled the dice with a confidence motion and lost 364 to 194.
Yes.
Which means the extreme right and the extreme left held hands and voted against him.
Yes, they did. He saw this coming. He had drinks for his staff the night before, sort of farewell occasion, because he knew he wasn't going to win. It means it goes back to President Macron.
Under their system, it would cause an election in Australia, for example. But in the French system, the president can name another prime minister. But it seems like he's not prepared for this.
Or call an election. He can do either.
Yes, he can, of course. Yeah, but he's not necessarily thrust into an election. But it seems to have caught him a little bit by surprise, Jack, which is kind of remarkable because we've been talking about this for the last few months. Or
it was going to happen. Why he lost the prime ministership was he wanted to do things like cap welfare payments, take away 2 public holidays.
These are essentially spending measures.
Yeah. Because their fiscal position is pretty perilous. But it seems to me that no one in French politics wants to make the hard decisions. They'd rather just France kind of meander along and get worse and worse and worse. No one wants to make the hard calls that are necessary to put it back on track. What's
their deficit? It'll be expressed in euro. Budget deficit of 5.8% of GDP, which is a national debt of 114% of GDP. So they've got very similar problems to those in Germany, those in the United States, and in the UK, Jack.
Yes, yeah, but they're doing nothing about them at all.
Well, I couldn't say the Americans have done a great deal about it either with the big, beautiful bill. There are some spending measures there, but they're mainly around working class people having access to free medical services. Yeah, so I won't say we won't use the royal we. You predicted this some time ago, Jack, that the battle over spending cuts was going to see Mr. Bayrou off or Monsieur Bayrou off, and that is essentially what has happened.
Yeah, and it's very hard to see. Well, it's an awful choice that Macron's going to have to make if he's going to appoint a new prime minister. He won't want an election, but he's going to. It's a very tricky choice as to who he can find, who can cobble together enough support to survive.
All right. Well, this is in relation to Gaza and Ukraine, and I guess we could include the seven conflicts that Donald Trump reckons he's put to bed One of those is between Israel and Iran. But a very pithy column from Marina Hyde, who writes for The Guardian. She's a wonderful columnist, often very, very funny. When things are at their worst, or politics is at their darkest, that's the time to read Marina Hyde. She's very, very good. But this is quite poignant. Jack, would you like to read it, or you want me to?
You can read it.
At operational level, however, things don't. She's talking particularly about the path. This is a piece called The Path to Peace. At operational level, however, things don't change. The path to peace still goes through politicians with power. Many of them are still terrible people. They will still have to have unpleasant and even toxic conversations in which horse trading and moral compromise are inevitable. And yet these things are still desirable because this is the way it has always ended. This is the way the bombs go silent, the way the children stop starving, the way the hideous carnage ends. It is a long, perilous and precarious path, but history has made it familiar because it is the only one that actually gets anywhere near where we need to go. And that's very, very true and honest words, Jack, that you'll never have a perfect settlement to bloody conflicts.
And it's a reminder that we've got to talk to some pretty awful people.
Yeah. We'll move on.
That's why I think we need to keep the UN. I think the UN's hopeless at most things it tries to do. I would get rid of all the UN agencies, but we need the UN itself because we need to have somewhere where you can talk to pretty terrible people.
Well, absolutely. I mean, the UN really is only a reflection of the level of conflict and disparate views that are held around the globe. I mean, you cannot come up with a better representation. I mean, we could talk about the League of Nations, Jack, and that was a complete disaster. The UN is at least representative of almost every country on earth. I think there are a couple that refused to sit in, North Korea being one. I think North Korea is in the UN, isn't it? I can't remember. One or two of them.
Where it comes unstuck is where it wants to run agencies, and it's terrible at those and makes the situation worse generally. But get rid of those, and the UN's worthwhile.
Nations have hand-passed to the UN all this time, Jack. So if you took the UN agencies away, there'd be nothing there. To provide any humanitarian aid, particularly with what's happened with Musk and USAID. I mean, that's a disaster in itself, with like 19 million projected people to die, 9 million of them children. That's just from the USAID cuts.
I can't think of a single UN agency that I would defend or even try to.
I know you're saying that, but if they weren't on the scene, who would do the work?
Well, I think somebody else would, but it wouldn't be corrupt. And that's the trouble with every agency of the UN, it's corrupt.
All right, moving on to the UK. Boris Johnson, the Grawn has run, the Guardian I should call them, the Grawniad. It was once nicknamed because of its high level of typographical errors. A trove of leaked data, they report, from Boris Johnson's private office reveals how the former Prime Minister has been profiting from contracts and influence he gained in office in a possible breach of ethics and lobbying rules. The Boris files contain emails, letters, invoices, speeches, and business contracts. They shine a spotlight on the inner workings of a publicly subsidised company Johnson established after leaving Downing Street in September 2022. The scandal is or the revelations, they say, have echoes of the Greensill Capital lobbying scandal that embroiled David Cameron, Jack. You're a big fan of Boris Johnson. You reckon you're a really capable bloke.
No, I thought he was going to win the election and win it pretty handily, and he did. I think the UK are just a bit quick to push people out of politics. Angela Rayner's been forced out for something that I don't think's a resignation offence. She was doing her best to minimise her tax payments, and I think that's perfectly understandable. And I just don't think that Johnson was pushed out of the Prime Ministership for holding a drinks function in the garden at number 10 Downing Street.
Well, it wasn't
that's
just
not
that,
a sack.
Jack. I mean, it wasn't just that. It was disastrous mismanagement of the UK economy, and the fact now that you've got, I mean, the UK's in serious trouble. Like France, it's got massive debt that has to be dealt with by serious players, and Johnson was never one of those. He might have been amusing to some, but he was a disaster for the country.
Anyway, all that's gone. So now we've got Keir Starmer, the Prime Minister. He's going to have to hold an election for the deputy of the party. He's appointed a new deputy Prime Minister, but that's a position without any real constitutional or political authority.
Authority, because it needs a membership vote, does it not?
It does. So he's going to have to hold this. And the real trick for this now, that the tricky bit for Starmer is that they're losing, the Labor Party is losing the working class to reform. So it's one of those situations. Well, what does the Labor Party stand for? I mean, Starmer believes in international law and all that kind of stuff, but it's very hard to see what else he really believes in. And the party, it could come out of this really quite well if people can unite around somebody to be deputy leader. But every factional group in existence is out there pushing their own person at the moment. So it's going to be messy.
So the vote is to be held. Well, have they got a date yet? Because it takes a fair bit of organisation, doesn't it?
I think the National Committee meets this week to set a timetable.
Meanwhile, in the polls, YouGov and others have indicated that Farage and Reform would win an election, but probably not have enough to have a parliamentary majority, Jack.
Yes.
Did you see any of Farage's performances in the US last week?
I saw a few small clips, but I didn't take a great deal of notice.
It wasn't. I mean, it was an opportunity for a few Democrats to land a few blows, but some of the stuff there about freedom is that Farage constantly goes on about is a bit much, given he's really a person who has got very profound totalitarian instincts. At the same time, the Starmer government just seems paralysed in terms of how to deal with him, and I think you could say the same of the Conservatives too. And I guess the big question is just how long will Reform last as a political enterprise? If they ever found themselves in government, well, that'd quickly destroy the party, I would think. But yeah, because they've got such a hodgepodge of bad policy ideas. Farage was actually citing Tony Abbott and the Nauru and Manus Island areas for deporting people, but it hasn't worked. I mean, we have different laws here, and it was all approved by our High Court, but you know the Rwanda proposal was rejected by the UK High Court, and it really doesn't seem to be a policy option at this stage.
No, they're going to have to do something about the boat arrivals. Otherwise,
they can't do that. They can't sort of find the third party nation to dump them.
There are other things that can be done. What you have to do is to look at what's the motivation for people to hop on a boat and come across the channel. What are they getting out of it to do that? What are the benefits that they get over and above anything else they get, right? And then you do something about them, and you'll discourage them from coming.
Well, the EU, Jack, has what's it called? Is it called the Dublin Agreement?
Yep.
And what does the Dublin Agreement mean?
Well, it means that if they come, say, from France to the UK, you can send them back. And that used to exist while they were in the EU, but they always got more incoming than they're ever able to get sent back. So it didn't work.
Yeah, it doesn't work. But if you're not in the EU, you can't use it. And a number of countries have indicated that they won't play by Dublin Agreement now anymore. But
none of them are, as far as I can tell.
Yeah.
They've all siloed themselves. It doesn't make any difference.
But it is. But
there are things.
Well, it is just another disaster related to Brexit, quite frankly, isn't it?
There are things that you can look at and say, is this an attraction to coming across by boat? One, you can come without documents. That's a big win. Two, if you get to the UK, you can do almost immediate family reunion, which you can't do in France.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
So you can start to remove those benefits bit by bit, and you change the monetary equation. You change the gamble for the people in France trying to come across.
So, same time, when you look at the numbers of boat arrivals, France is taking almost 5 times of what the UK is taking themselves. So they've got significant numbers and great social pressures that come with that, those figures. And it seems to me like the UK is bleating about
50,000 people a year. Like in Australia, it's a political poison, and if you don't do something about it, you'll lose.
All right. Over to Germany now, local elections, the municipal government elections. All parties except the AfD, that's the extreme right wing, have pledged to speak only positively about migration in the upcoming local election campaign in the West German city of Cologne. Beautiful city, Cologne. Jack, you ever been there?
No.
CDU, SPD, Green, FDP, Left and Volt have signed on the initiative of the association Kölner Roundtable for Integration, not to speak negatively about migration during the election campaign. All right. Well, that doesn't sound like a terribly good idea, Jack.
No. You've
got to at least be realistic about things. Otherwise, you will get extremists popping up.
If you tell people that their concerns are not legitimate, they will find a political home somewhere.
When are the elections? Do you know?
The Cologne elections, I think.
It'd just be really interesting to watch the result, and we should update our listeners with that result. But yeah, I agree with you.
Even if you win the election by that method, what you do is you entrench people into the part of politics that you claim to be trying to work against.
Yeah, exactly right. And well, it is playing into the hands of the AfD, who are a pretty nasty sort of group of people.
If you were the local AfD chief, you'd be sitting back rubbing your hands together with glee.
I know. It's like they really don't know how to deal with these people. Well, just taking us back here, there's something that you wanted to talk about, Jack. Why are kids so funny? And are they? Firstly, are they funny?
I think they are.
Well, we do get a giggle. I mean, I've got my grandchildren around, and they are pretty funny buggers. They are 2 and 1 is one is 363 days old. So he's a piece of work, just quietly. But
what's his birthday? What's his birthday?
9/11.
Oh, okay. Right.
Can never forget it.
Yep.
9/11 and the other one, I've got my little mnemonic, so I'll never forget. May the 4th be with you. So that's the 4th of May is the eldest grandchild.
I very nearly share a birthday with your first one.
Oh, he's September 11. So
I'm 12, so I can tell you where I was on the September 11th. I was in a hotel in Adelaide. We'd been out for dinner to celebrate the birthday, and I got back and thought, just another half a glass of wine and a bit of CNN, you know.
I just got a call from a mate. I was watching a documentary, and in fact, it was Rumble in the Jungle, which I just loved. And he said, "Oh, mate, there's a plane's just flown in." And I said, "Mate, I'm watching this documentary. I didn't realise. I thought it was a light aircraft." But I flipped over reluctantly, and that was just it was just all happening just before midnight, so about 11 o'clock on the 9th of the 11th in Australian time. But anyway, back to this subject. Why are kids so funny? And I guess the thrust is that they're not self-conscious, Jack.
That's right. Anne Althouse got this right. They haven't been socialised yet. They're not holding back, worrying that something might be stupid or weird or disgusting. to be funny is to take some risk. Ricky Gervais is a classic example of that. He will say the unsayable. But I read that there's a long piece that she referred to in the New Yorker, and sadly, it was just what you'd expect these days from the New Yorker. It was sort of fairly turgid, a pretty dull read. It's a shame, really. It used to be a rare treat.
Yeah,
I
actually subscribed. I subscribed a few years back and stopped because it just.
But what I did notice, though, I flicked through. I used to always like the New Yorker cartoons, and the New Yorker cartoons are back in form.
Yeah, no, you can get a good list of them just from their website. I think, there's a certain number available to non-subscribers, put it that way.
Yeah, they are. And for the first time in probably 20 years, they're now worth having a look at.
You mentioned Ricky Gervais, and I just want to let our listeners know Ricky Gervais' favourite comedian is Stuart Lee, and I don't know if anyone has heard a lot of Stuart Lee. I've been watching a lot of his videos lately. He is a very, very funny man. It's not conventional comedy. He will say, "I don't write jokes," but then he'll crack a few. When he started one of his shows, it was just not long after the Queen had died, and he said that his BBC special had been cancelled and was replaced by some sort of sapphic pornography, which he didn't include too much. But he did say, very brave, the Queen, for hanging on just so she could receive Boris Johnson's resignation letter, and then goes on to say, well, monarchists weren't quite sure what to do, so they started leaving marmalade sandwiches because the Queen had been involved in one of the Paddington film, the first Paddington film. And so they were leaving, the monarchists were leaving marmalade sandwiches outside Buckingham Palace. And the police said, monarchists, please don't do that. It will attract other vermin. And then goes on to say, then they decided they were going to leave Paddington Bears outside Buckingham Palace, which was great because the footman would scrape them all up and give them to Prince Andrew to use as bait. So Stuart Lee, check him out. Very, very funny. He's been a comedian for 30, 40 years. He really is the governor. All right, moving on. Just one final thing in media, Jack. The Free Press has been acquired by Paramount, owners of CBS. So the Free Press is the founder of it. What's her name?
Barry Weiss.
Barry
It was started
Weiss,
by Barry Weiss, who was pushed out of the New York Times. He was a journalist and columnist there. And she's quite enterprising. She and her partner, who was also a New York Times journalist, Nellie Bowles, I think, went off to LA and started the Free Press. And it's been a resounding success.
I look at it occasionally. I mean, look, they're about to sell it somewhere between 100
and 200
million, which seems like a fairly big range. Just on the report, perhaps the report should be a little sharper. But
well, it depends what comes with it. The deal, as it is currently expressed, is that not only she gets 100 or somewhere between 100 and 200 million, but she gets a free rein to run CBS political coverage.
That's what people are concerned about. I mean, look, if you look at the Free Press, and I'd encourage our listeners to do that, it's easy enough to find online. You'll find that it's really just a collection of right-wing commentary, right-wing and conservative commentary. I mean, some of it's good, some of it's well-written, some of it's not so, some of it's the old culture war sort of stuff. But, yeah, $100 million. It must have decent numbers reading it.
Yeah, I mean, there have been some real success stories in people moving to alternative media and making a big profit out of this.
Now, yeah, I mean, as far as I could tell, maybe I just don't dip into the subscriber base. I might read a piece or two every now and then, but it didn't seem to be a subscription basis. But there may well be.
Yeah, no, there is. It's partly publicly available and partly subscription.
Right. Okay. So yes, you'll be able to at least have a sense of how much money they're dragging in around their subscriptions. I'm just trying to think of a couple of others, Jack. But
she started in her spare room, and all of a sudden she had enough money coming in to employ. First it was 10, and then it just grew.
Claire Lehman's done been an absolute success in Australia with her. With her, and I'm just trying to think of the name. Sorry, Claire.
Unheard?
No. Yeah, she writes frequently for the Australians. A rather lovely person, Quillette.
Quillette, that's right.
And she's had a lot of success with that. And again, it's sort of conservative, but I mean, it's not. No, I wouldn't call it conservative. I'd call it right of centre, or centre right, I suppose, is probably the pitch.
Megan Kelly's now gone from just having her own podcast to, I think, 6 or 7 programs.
Yeah, and look again. I mean, I don't know. I mean, there is this sort of, we call it the democratisation of media, and Jack and I are involved in it. We're doing this, off our own backs and what have you. So it is working for some. The trouble with it, Jack, is the trouble with certainly people like Megan Kelly is that they will do and say the most outrageous things in order to attract big numbers.
Yep.
So caveat emptor.
Which is a lot like the business model for tabloid newspapers has been for 200 years. Yes, but yeah.
Yeah, true enough, I suppose. But there is a process. There's an editorial process that says, whoa, too far. It doesn't trigger all that often, to be fair. But now, where were we? Oh, sport. Here we go, and we're right on time to do our sports finals period. First week of the finals for rugby league fans. It's their super weekend, and the AFL had theirs last weekend. We got the Raiders v the Broncos in Canberra. It's Storm v the Bulldogs in Melbourne. Warriors v Panthers in Auckland, and Sharks v the Roosters at Shark Park, Jack, which actually should be nuked from space. It's an absolute disaster. They got a rat problem. It's just not fit for purpose, and it's been left to become more and more derelict. You might remember that the Sharks tried to sell it off. The Sharks management tried to sell it off and turn it into blocks of flats. And I think there was some sort of planning issue around it. So the thing's just been left to rot ever since. So they will play the Roosters. The Sharks will play the Roosters at these decrepit old grounds. Worse than Leichhardt.
I must confess that I've never been to Shark Park.
When I say it's not good, I haven't been there either. But there's a guy on Instagram who reviews all the sporting grounds, going around the facilities, the food, the cost, and where you can see, and best places to watch the game from. And he was absolutely scathing about Shark Park. All right, the Storm go in after a thumping at the hands of the Roosters, and then a loss to the Broncos in Brisbane over the weekend. The Raiders got belted too, but it's a good argument. I mean, I think there are arguments to and fro, but it's a good argument for the AFL's week off before the finals. The Raiders, I think, rested 10 players. The Panthers rested 6 or 7. Not sure about the Storm, but they went down to the Broncos. But they're all raring to go there. Out of these games, it's really hard to pick a winner. I'd expect the Sharks to beat the Roosters. Raiders v Broncos. The Raiders have been in very, very good form, but you can't really knock the Broncos' form either. Storm v Bulldogs. Storm beat the Bulldogs about 4 weeks ago, but their form hasn't been great in the last couple of weeks. And Warriors v Panthers, you'd normally say Warriors in New Zealand start favourites, but they're up against the reigning premiers. So 4 terrific games. Wallabies, Jack, conceded. They might be getting into a bit of a habit, Jack. They concede a few points before they fight back, and they did against Argentina.
Yes.
Did you see any of it?
No, it was on. It was on in North Queensland at about 2 p.m, which I thought was just about the silliest decision I've ever heard.
I did see some of the tries in Australia. Australian rugby's in
It's
pretty rude health, and they've got some money, of course, so that they've made from the Lions too.
If this time they look after the money rather than hose it up against a wall, they'll be in good shape.
Yeah, I think they've got a good coach, an All Blacks coach. I think they've got a good list and got some injuries, but they've been able to work through it. And they play an exciting brand of rugby. That's what I like about it most. AFL finals, Jack. Cats. Do we hand them the cup just yet? They look head and shoulders over the rest of them.
Yeah, you still got to win.
I know. We don't hand them out too early, but they do look the best side in it. Collingwood played very, very well against Adelaide. They have got good history there.
I had thought the Collingwood captain had come to his end. He's been quite poor over the last 18 months, I would have thought. But he played the best game I've ever seen him play.
Yeah, he was the wall. That's Darcy Moore. He was the wall on the weekend. I think he took about 8 or 9 intercept marks, and he was just everywhere where he needed to be. And
you and I were talking about the umpiring on, was it Friday night?
Well, this was the AFL have acknowledged that a mistake was made. This was the game between Geelong and the Brisbane Lions, the reigning premiers, and the Brisbane Lions were shaping up for a goal which was very gettable. Set shot at goal, I think 20 or 30.
Geelong were shaping up.
Geelong were shaping up to kick a goal, which would have put them about 6 goals in front, and all of a sudden there was a blast of the whistle. And the free kick was awarded down to the other end of the ground at the other goal square to Cam Rayner. The Irish fella O'Connor had sort of knocked him over, but wasn't very much in it. And the AFL has acknowledged that wasn't great. But Rayner kicked the goal and then stuck his chin out to the rest of the Geelong players, and one of whom knocked him over, and they got another one out of it, and it was a 3-goal turnaround, essentially.
Yeah, and there was another goal.
Really bad decision. The first decision was terrible.
There was another goal just before it where Tom Stewart pushed Kai Lohmann in the chest, but pushed him over, right? And Lohmann got a free kick and kicked a goal. So all three were a bit similar. They were all involved pushes where the ball's a long way away or the ball's not in play.
Yeah, I saw that one too. So
yeah, and like Lee Matthews, I think all of these are probably free kicks, because I don't think you should be able to push and shove when you shouldn't be able to interfere with your opponent when the ball's 50 metres or 100 metres away.
The trouble is, so you shouldn't be able to knock a player, your opponent, to the ground off the ball, right?
Yeah.
And I think everyone accepts that. But the trouble is, and clearly, I mean, I don't know whether Rayner was posing for a free kick or not. It certainly wasn't enough force in the contact. And so there's been a lot of discussion about whether we fine players significant figures of money, significant amounts of money for putting it on, for sort of fake responses. And I think that's probably the answer. Fine them a big chunk, 10 grand, and they'll stop doing it.
I don't mind if the AFL decides interfering with a player when the ball's not in play is to be a free kick. I just don't think the first week of the finals is a good time to introduce that rule.
Well, they acknowledged the error that the Geelong player had not used sufficient force to warrant a free kick, and that's such a grey area, because the umpire's seen the bloke go to the ground, Cam Rayner go to ground, and he said, "Well, that's just not something we can expect." But
did you see the vision from before that? Rayner's gone across to the umpire. And he's in his face talking to the umpire about what's been happening between he and O'Connor, right? Then they go back to the goal square, and the umpire is watching them.
Yeah, that's not good. It's not a good reflection on Cam Rayner or the umpire, actually.
No, it's not.
And look, in the end, it didn't matter. Geelong won comfortably. And as I say, they look head and shoulders over. This weekend, we've got Hawthorn v the Crows. I was almost going to say the Roosters. Hawthorn v the Crows. And I think Hawthorn, well, we'll see how they go. Adelaide had a bad one. As you say, Darcy Moore was terrific. They've got 3 tall forwards that hardly made an impact. And Tex probably played the best of the 3. But yeah, they could easily bounce back. But I just think Hawthorn might be a bit of a smoky to make the grand final. And of course, we'll also have the Suns, who won their first final by a point in a terrific game. Bad luck to Fremantle. Probably should have won it, but it was a hell of a good game to watch. I kind of like there's something not like about the Suns. And the Suns will, of course, play the Lions at the Gabba, I presume that is.
Yeah, it is at the Gabba. The Hawks are doing a fair bit right. I think that's, what did I read last night? Jai Newcomb has played, their centreman has played 3 finals and has been the top-rated champion data player in all 3 of them.
I'd have to go and have a look at his background check, but they sort of plucked him
in
a bit.
A
mid-year draft, wasn't he?
Mid-year draft, yes.
And picked because he was a sort of tackling beast and tackling machine. But he's a lot more than that now. In his first few games, in first year or so, you'd see him just be hard at the footy. Didn't get a lot of it, but his opponent would certainly know he'd been playing on him.
Yeah, personally,
but now he got some skills and ability to run away. He's not quick, but he's got the ability to find time and space.
Yeah, personally, I've always rated players who can play well in finals.
Oh well, it's the key to everything. There are some blokes who never get that right, and there might be one from Carlton who's had Charlie Curnow's had pretty ordinary finals. Whether he's going to be a Carlton player or not remains to be they'd want something good for him. If he's going to go up to Sydney, I think it's either got to be Errol, probably a little bit out of Errol's money, or the number one. What's his name?
Warner.
Yeah, Chad Warner. I think that would be a decent.
I can't see them letting either of those 2 go. So
look, he might just end up playing for Carlton, but I just it's something not quite right about the way he's been sort of yes and no. I'm playing. I'm not. I'm playing. I'm not. Now I'm in contention. The Blues have indicated to a few to go and see what you can get for yourself. I think Motlop might be the latest. With some interest from Port Adelaide. So there'll be a pretty new Carlton side next year, with or without Charlie Curnow. All right, well, that takes us out of the 2 Jacks for this week, and I want to thank you all for listening. We did enjoy bringing you our thoughts and opinions from our listeners, for some of our listeners, and we include them in the program. So if you want to do the same, you can drop us a note. You can get hold of me on X. My DMs are always open. That's at Jack the Insider. And you can email the conditional, what's it called? The conditional. Oh, God. Jesus, Jack, help me out.
The conditional release.
The conditional release. I've been talking too long. The conditional release program at gmail.com, or you can get hold of Jack on his Substack. Please, Jack, help me out.
HongKongChat.substack.com. You can find us both. If you can't find us both, you're really in trouble.
Yes, you need internet lessons. All right, folks, thanks again, and we'll speak to you next week. Cheers.